I rise today to speak in strong opposition to H.J. Res. 165, a Congressional Review Act resolution to repeal the Biden-Harris administration's Title IX rule. The administration's final Title IX rule does three things. First, it safeguards against all forms of sex-based harassment and discrimination by making several improvements to the 2020 Trump administration's Title IX rule. These include requiring schools to take prompt and effective action to address sexual harassment, as opposed to the lax Trump standard that a school's response just not be deliberately indifferent. The new rule places the duty to report possible discrimination on more employees, in contrast to the old rule, which only required some employees to report when they had actual, not possible knowledge of sexual discrimination or assault. And it recognizes that discrimination based on sex includes discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity following Supreme Court precedent. Second, the Title IX rule promotes accountability and fairness in how schools respond to and discipline sex-based discrimination by mandating that schools handle complaints in a timely manner and implement a fair and transparent process. And finally, this rule empowers students and families to exercise their rights under Title IX. The administration's Title IX rule explicitly protects sexual assault survivors and people affected by discrimination from retaliation for seeking to have their Title IX rights enforced. Further, the rule guarantees access to supportive services for survivors of sexual assault and accused individuals. And despite what my colleagues repeatedly claim, I thought I was in the wrong debate for a minute, this rule does not address students' participation in sports. This false narrative follows the many attacks against the LGBTQI+ community in this House and state legislatures across the country. We have had more than 60 anti-LGBTQI+ votes on the House floor of this Congress, and it's a distraction to claim that this rule harms women in sports. For example, the department has not issued a separate proposed rule to address athletics. They are working on it, but it has not been finalized. That's not the debate we're having today. Let me be clear. Trans girls, like all girls, deserve the opportunity to participate on school sports teams. But my colleagues across the aisle keep talking about athletics because they don't want to admit the truth behind this resolution. The resolution is an attempt to undermine non-discrimination protections for LGBTQI+ students. LGBTQI students, including trans students, deserve to go to school free from discrimination, and that's what this rule is about. It's not about bathrooms. In fact, the real risk of violence occurs when transgender people are barred from using the appropriate facility. Transgender people experience shockingly high rates of sexual and physical violence and are much more likely to be a victim than a perpetrator. And I am also extremely concerned about the false narrative that my colleagues have invented to portray trans individuals as criminals attempting to enter restrooms to harm others. That is not supported by evidence or data. Transgender people want the same thing everyone else wants: safety, comfort, and privacy. We must work to protect the transgender community from discrimination and stop the false narratives that exacerbate and encourage prejudice against innocent people. This bill is particularly extreme because passing it would prevent any substantially similar rule from being enacted on these issues in the future. Voting for this bill would prohibit protections for sexual assault survivors and protections against discrimination on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity in schools that receive federal funding. If Republicans truly cared about protecting women and children, they'd stop this prejudiced rhetoric and take action on bills that would actually protect women from discrimination and harassment, and defend women's reproductive health care, make child care more affordable, preserve opportunities in workplaces for all parents, especially women. Instead, this joint resolution is another attempt to undercut this administration's efforts to empower survivors and protect all Americans from discrimination. I do want to note this is another plank in the extremist Project 2025 takeover of government that will sanction discrimination and strip Americans of their rights and freedoms. Page 333, if you're looking for it. Now, I also note, Madam Speaker, that yesterday my Republican colleagues were supporting dignity for dishwashers. I implore all of you, so show some dignity to the LGBTQI students who just want to go to school and learn free of discrimination. Show some dignity to the girls and women who survived sexual assault and deserve justice. So for these reasons and others, I encourage all of my colleagues to vote no, and I reserve the balance of my time.